Hello, welcome to Mind Chat. My name's Philip Goff. Philip Goff, even. Keith. Keith, my friend. What are you doing?
Oh, sorry. I was just catching up on a bit of the latest news.
Oh, yeah.
How are you? How are you, Philip? What's been
I'm
happening
not
with
too
you?
bad, more of the same, knocking around, more of the same. What about yourself?
Same old, eh? Yes. Oh well, I've been doing one or two things. I've had a trip to Lisbon where which I enjoyed very much. The people there made me. Well, Maria came as well. She gave some talks. We both talked on artificial intelligence and the large language models and these sorts of things. And
Very nice.
it was a very enjoyable experience. The people there,
Oh.
Rob Clouds, Vitor de Santos, they made us very welcome. And so that was good.
What was that a particular event? Was it a conference or was it?
It was a couple of events. One with Rob's I can't remember the name of it now, group at his institute, the Nova Institute, and another was the second Portuguese symposium on the philosophy of artificial intelligence. Quite a big thing, interdisciplinary thing. That was a lot of fun, and I really liked Portugal. I'm starting to read some Portuguese literature now.
Really?
So, what are we doing? What's happening in the world of Mind Chat, Philip?
Well, you want to know? We've been off air for quite a while. I had, a couple of little brain bleeds at the start of the summer.
Yes.
So we've been off air because of that. We have had one recently, but that was actually pre-recorded with the wonderful Annika Harris slightly before my injury. But I suppose we're just getting back in motion now. We have very soon Andy Clark, the wonderful Andy Clark, cognitive scientist, philosopher. Kind of views you sort of like Keith. There's kind of errors you make, but a wonderful, wonderful philosopher and human being. So we got him coming up next month, and then we've got our delayed Christmas special with Pete Mandic and Angela Mendelevici, which we were supposed to do last Christmas and kept getting delayed, and so it's gonna come up this Christmas. So we have a tradition in Mind Chat that we get two other philosophers or scientists to debate the silly views Keith and I have, or approximations, and that's what we're going to be doing there. I think we decided we're going to mix it up a bit of some Mind Chats live, casual geeky conversations, and then some pre-recorded, perhaps when someone's got a book out or something, and mix up the two formats.
That sounds good. And we have we're hoping to reschedule the interview with Peter Godfrey Smith that we had to cancel when you were.
Yeah,
when
we were
you were
just about to
injured.
do that before I
Yeah.
had my little brain bleeds.
Yes, I think we were.
A bit of a challenging summer with all that, but I've been very lucky. It could have been a permanent brain damage.
Well,
And,
I think it's fair to say that everyone, whatever their views on any aspect of the things we discussed, we thought everybody was very concerned for you and very, very pleased that you had a good result. It could have been, as you say, it could have been a lot more serious. So you take care of yourself.
Thanks, Keith. I'm nearly there. Not 100%. Still needing to take. The main thing's been really low energy levels, and still not 100% there. But I'm 90%. So yeah. So what are we doing today, anyway?
Well, now as I say, I've been having a look at the news, and you've been in the news a bit, haven't you? You've
as Oscar Wilde said, the only thing worse than being talked about is not being talked about.
So you've you've come out. Have you? Is this a coming out of something that was already there, or is it an actual? This is something I'd like to talk about. How much of a change is it? What's happened is, as you announced on the podcast, I think we'll have the link on a podcast with. I'm afraid I can't remember the name of the interview. It's called Capturing Christianity. The interviewer's name is
Cameron Bertuzzi.
So, which is a big a podcast, Christian podcast, and you went on there and you announced that you were a Christian, that you were adopting the I guess, identity, Christian identity. But at the same time, you managed to both become a Christian and become a heretic at the very same moment, which must be a record, really. I mean, usually people sort of, so you endorsed a heretical form of Christianity. Let's put it like that.
I just have to annoy both sides, that's always what I
Just
like to do. Just piss
so,
everyone off.
I'd like to talk to you a bit about this. I think it interests me very much, and also hopefully some of the people who are listening will have questions for you. So is it okay if we talk a bit about that? If I ask you a few things about that?
Yeah, and thanks. You suggested this, Keith. It's very kind of you. You're always very kind to me,
Oh, thank you.
and yeah, let's have a chat about it.
Well, I mean, it interests me, and I mean, I listened to the interview and also you wrote a long piece on Eon magazine explaining the background to this. I don't know quite what to call it. It's not exactly a conversion. Or is it well, let's tease that out.
Being dramatic with the word conversion, maybe.
Yes,
Go on.
you spoke of a leap
Stop
of faith
interrupting.
in the William James sense, and so, but you talked about the background to it, about some of the history of your relation with religion, and you explained the nature of the Christianity that you're endorsing and why you're endorsing it. And I don't think it will come as a great surprise to anyone who's read your last book, why, because already in that you were endorsing a sort of qualified deism, something like that. You thought there was a benign purpose somehow at work in forming the universe that had a goal in mind, a benign goal, the creation of life. I think that's not too putting it too
That'll do.
simplistic. So I think that's already a sort of deism, I suppose we could call it. Though at the same time, you're very clear that you thought the traditional concept that there was nothing like the traditional God in the traditional sense as omnipowerful, because you thought that the existence of all the evil and undeserved evil in the world was incompatible with that. So, well, what's changed? What is this? What exactly has happened since publishing that book? That is, because in that I don't think there's any. You talk at the end about communities of faith and about how valuable they are as social institutions. So one can already see you sort of moving towards embracing some community in that sense, and that was very nice stuff. But you don't think you actually endorse it. So what made you take this further step, and what exactly does this further step consist in?
Thanks, Keith. That's a good place to start. Yeah, I think, as you say, maybe the bigger intellectual change was the Why book that I published last year, modestly titled "Why: The Purpose of the Universe." And this just resulted from, over a long period, me coming to think that both sides of this perennial debate between theists and atheists have something right and something wrong. There's something each side can't explain. I think traditional theism, where we have what we call the omnigod, all knowing, all powerful, perfectly good, that struggles to account for the terrible suffering we find in the world. Why would a loving God who can do anything allow such terrible suffering? On the other hand, I also think there's things atheism struggles to explain, or at least traditional atheism, in the sense that there's no purpose in the universe. There's no purpose outside of human purposes. For example, the fine-tuning of physics for life, psychophysical harmony in the consciousness realm that we've got a video on. And so the point now is, we both of these sides have something right and something wrong. We need to explore middle ground options. And one middle ground option I explored there was the idea of a god of limited powers, an idea that John Stuart Mill took seriously, for what it's worth. So a god who's good, loving, but can't do anything, can't do everything. It's not the case that they can do absolutely anything. And so they've sort of made the best universe they can. And of course, we need to spell this out in a bit more detail, but I think this has the potential to explain all of the data we find, we can explain the fine tuning in terms of the purposes of God, and we can explain the imperfections of the universe, the suffering in terms of God's limitations. So I think something like this, I mean, I had a few different variations in the book. Something like this is, I think, where the evidence is really pointing. Um, so that was that, and we've got a Halloween special Mind Chat episode on that if people want to dig into that a bit more. But what came after that, I suppose, was wide reading and talking to a lot of different Christian thinkers, and coming across this form of Christianity, this interpretation of Christianity called the participation view, which I think kind of fits quite well with the hypothesis of a God of limited powers. So that was the first step in thinking, actually, there's some connection here. This kind of fits quite well. And I'd certainly say there's a great deal of uncertainty here. That's what I try to emphasize this whole time, and maybe we'll get more into this. I think this is all very, very uncertain. But this particular form of Christianity, different to other forms of Christianity that I still don't find very plausible, but this particular form of Christianity I've come to think of as a credible possibility. It's something that has a reasonable chance, not more than 50%, but a reasonable chance of being true, because it fits well, I think, with this God of limited powers hypothesis that I think is strongly supported by the evidence.
Okay. So look, that's. I mean, I'm not. I don't really buy the arguments in in why.
What? Okay.
Particularly the one with psychophysical harmony, which is just a problem you've just invented in order to find, to lead us. Anyway, but let's suppose I had been convinced by that.
We can agree on there, but let's leave that for another day.
We can go back. We've had that. Let's suppose
I thought we agreed that let's not get lost in this rabbit hole, but I thought we kind of agreed that that's where you end up if you think there's a hard problem of consciousness.
Like, it is, but that's why you should. Well, that's you've already made. Yeah, no, of course.
So it's not just
Let's suppose I was convinced
anyway,
by something like that.
Let's leave that.
And I thought we needed, I was sort of thinking, yeah, okay, something purposive, something creative, benevolent, benign, whatever, that's sort of operating at a really fundamental level. It's shaping the fundamental laws of the universe, right? Okay, so, and you persuaded me this on sort of, well, by pointing out, let's say, the values of the fundamental constant. So we've started with really basic stuff. The universe has this character, fundamental character, and if we buy the best explanation of that is that there's some sort of force that's driving towards life or something like that. Okay, now that all seems very, very, very general, very abstract. And then I look at Christianity, and it seems to be a very, very specific human doctrine that it arose at a very specific time in history, in very specific cultural and social circumstances, and of course on one particular planet, in the solar system, in one very, 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 very specific region of the universe at one specific time, and a bunch of people started believing this specific thing. So how do we get from that very general claim about there being some purpose at the work in the universe to the claim that details of it were revealed at this particular moment? Details of the plans of this, maybe I'm caricaturing now, but that somehow this force started to operate at this, or changed its method of operation in some way at this particular moment 2,000 years ago in Judea. Help me to make that link, help me to make that transition, and tell me exactly what of traditional Christianity this participatory view that you have, what it retains of that.
Yeah, those kind of considerations you're raising very much resonate with me intellectually, and maybe one of the reasons I think this is all terribly uncertain. I mean, let me say one thing to make people realize perhaps where I'm coming from is a little bit different to what they might think of Christianity. Just because you said revealed there, I mean, I don't think the Bible is the divinely dictated word of God, right? I do not. I treat the New Testament as a historical document, right? I think it's a very, very useful historical document. I suppose I'm a kind of amateur New Testament scholar. I mean, I just in the sense that I read New Testament scholars, and I said I've kind of become persuaded that there is a lot we can learn about the character and teaching of Jesus, what was going on there. Um, I mean, even the more skeptical New Testament scholars like Bart Ehrman, I think, would say that, it's a question of degree. I mean, just one thing while I've raised that, I mean, I think one thing that's amazing is that the letters from Paul in the Bible, there's 13 of them. Most, pretty much all scholars, I would say, think 7 of them are genuine, and then the others are disputed to an extent. But 7 of them are genuine, and they were written about 25 years later. So by the standards of ancient history, this is quite spectacular in a sense by the standards of ancient history, that we've got someone writing in a quite personal way 25 years later, someone who didn't know Jesus, but who knew and spent long periods of time with Peter and a couple of the other initial followers of Jesus. So that is really, I think without that, maybe we'd be like, I don't know what the hell's going on. But I think those letters help. Anyway, so I treat it like a historical document. I think there's lots of things it just gets wrong. I don't think Jesus thought it was all right to be gay or to have gay sex, at least. And I think he was just wrong. Although I think he was also incredibly progressive in the genuine letters, for example, proposing reciprocal duties between husbands and wives, quite remarkable at the time. But anyway, so just to say, this is just,
What about
I
the
treat
reports
it
of
as a
miracles?
historical
What about the reports of miracles in the Gospels?
well, I would say I'm at most agnostic about, especially about the more kind of nature miracles, as they're called. I mean, if well, let's maybe pause that. Okay, let's. You
Okay.
asked about this participatory view and
Yes.
how that
Tell me the
fits
bits
in.
you do.
So I
Tell me
think
the
that
bits you do endorse.
I think Sorry, I rambled a bit about the Bible there for a while. I'm a bit of a geek on the New Testament, but
Noticing that.
I mean the core idea of this participatory view is that the ultimate goal or purpose of the universe is for um, God and the universe to come into a deep state of unity, a more intimate, organic, unified connection, and that this is something which is progressing over time. So there might be a bigger kind of cosmic vision here that's not just about a couple of thousand years ago, that this is an ongoing process, perhaps from the first beginnings of the universe, perhaps continuing an ongoing process of God and the universe becoming more intimately involved with each other. But the thought is that in with the Jesus stuff at that particular time, there was some quite radical and decisive step forward in this process. So yeah, so I've come to think, because of the arguments in the Y book, I've come to think there is a purpose to the universe. There is somewhere it's going, something it's all about. And I always thought of Christianity of just the sort of what we call penal substitution, that it's all about where we've done very bad things, so we need to be punished, but Jesus is going to be punished for us. I mean, I have all sorts of problems with that. But this idea that the purpose of the universe might be, so think of it this way, sum it up this way, right? God's trying to create a perfect universe, but is just only able to do it in 2 stages, right? In the first stage, God creates a kind of okay universe with the right kind of physics that will eventually evolve intelligent life. And then in the second stage, as life becomes more evolved, God brings the universe to perfection, brings the universe to a better place by becoming more intimately connected to it. And once you're in the mindset of thinking, only once you're in the mindset of thinking this purpose of the universe, and you hear about that, I kind of think, yeah, that's
Well,
a plausible possibility. It's not too complicated. I've got to the point of thinking it's a credible possibility on the table. I
Well,
suppose that's
look,
where I'm up to.
two questions. Um, what exactly was the nature of this participation? Because the traditional view is that God became human, that Jesus was God. They were numerically identical in some hard to understand way. And I guess when you talk of participation, you're gesturing at something along those lines, that Jesus wasn't just an ordinary man with particularly enlightened ideas and a sense of the purpose of the universe, maybe, that he actually was something, I don't know, metaphysically special about him. And so I want to press you on exactly what that participation involved. And second, you talked about two stages. Why did the creator of the universe wait however many billion years and choose this particular location on this particular planet in this solar system, in this galaxy, in this galactic cluster to do it? Or are they doing it all the time? And if so, what's the significance of that particular event?
Yeah, so I've got a big paper under review on exactly the details of these questions. So obviously in
I'll
this
give spoilers then.
this yeah, I'll do my best. In this article was a sort of a popular article which was already too long, but trying to give broad brushstrokes, and these are important questions. So, I mean, the way it links to Christianity, I suppose, the idea, and so this view is, I should say, the people who defend it, it's very much connected actually to how the Eastern Orthodox Church thinks about the core of Christianity. I think the focus on kind of sin and punishment is a bit more Western. Um, there is in the Eastern Orthodox Church, it's much more connected to God becoming like us so we can become like God. But this has
Okay.
been defended in Western analytic philosophy by Robin Collins, who people might know for his work on fine tuning, or Tim Bain and Greg Restall. Tim Bain, people might know from his work on consciousness, not generally known for his philosophy of religion, although he does write some.
Mm.
Um, so the idea would be, look, so this is the goal of the universe, right? For God and the universe to come into a state of unity. People think of Jesus had this analogy of a vine and its branches, right? This kind of intimate organic connection. So that's the goal, but there's a bit of a problem, right? We're a little bit different to God. I don't know about you, Keith. You're a lovely fella, but God's kind of timeless, immaterial, ultimate cause of everything that is and was and will be, whereas you and I are just kind of essentially temporal embodied contingent beings, right? So they kind of don't fit together. Collins has this analogy that you can't kind of attach a branch to a horse. You can't graft a branch to a horse. They're sort of too alien to each other. So how does God solve this problem? By God becoming a bit more like us, right? Taking on a physical nature, sharing in our form of existence, so that we can share in a deeper way in God's form of existence. Now, you're saying it's pro-Colossus this particular time. I feel that. But I would say, in the way I'm thinking about it, it's part of a bigger cosmic, non-parochial story, which did, as part of that story, this ongoing story, had this important radical moment a couple of thousand years ago. But, I mean, in any scientific story, evolutionary story, there are big moments, big evolutions. So it doesn't, from that perspective, it doesn't seem so weird that there would be a temporally specific big jump in a larger cosmic story.
It seems to me there's two ways you could go here, and I'm still not quite sure which they are. One could be that Jesus, or you like to call him, uh, how do you say the Jewish pronunciation? Yeshua?
Yeshua. Yeah,
Yeshua. Sorry,
in the book. I mean, I
sorry.
borrowed this from
Yeshua.
Francis Spufford, the novelist,
Right.
who is also a Christian. And about over 10 years ago now, he had this wonderful book called Unapologetic, where he tried to sort of explain Christianity in a way
Yeah.
that kind of, breaks breaks our fixed way of thinking
Right.
about
Yes.
it and our very
Okay.
narrow. And he invented a different word for sin, and then he said, I'm going to, because people attach Jesus to maybe a very specific,
Yeah. Yeah.
perhaps
Culturally.
US Protestant,
Yeah.
increasingly nationalistic conception of. So to break that up, you talk about
No, I think
Yeshua.
that that's a good idea. So Yeshua. So it seems there's two ways you could go. One here is that this this person, this preacher, this Judean preacher, was a particularly charismatic person who was particularly attuned to the meaning of the universe. He'd not read your book, but he was sort of intuited a lot of the things that are there. That he was immensely charismatic. He had such an effect on people that he transformed their lives, and that they tended to interpret this as him actually performing miracles and rising from the dead and so on, and they expressed it in this way. But really, he was just a man, but a man with this special attunement to the meaning of the universe. And a sort of humanist version, but still deist in that it imports all the stuff from Y. Another one is that, no, he was more than that. There was really supernatural things happened around him. And I suppose the focus of that is going to be what you're going to say about the resurrection. I know you don't think it was a bodily resurrection, but in the Capturing Christianity talk, you suggest that it was something very strange, supernatural happened to Yeshua's body, that it was actually transformed into, I think you say something like pure energy or something like that. Now, if you say the first, then it seems what your view is pretty much compatible, I suppose, with most other religious traditions, because they can all say that about Jesus. They can say, yeah, he was very enlightened and so on, as say Muslims do. If you say the second, then it looks like you're saying Christianity has locked onto something metaphysically special that other religions are missing. And so, you have a claim for Christianity being the superior religion. Which way do you want to go? Not to put you on the spot or anything.
Very nicely asked. Yeah, so what you started with is, I guess, the ultra liberal interpretation of Christianity, where Jesus is just one more enlightened person, not sort of cosmically special. I had a lovely email. I've had lots of lovely emails about this. I haven't had any nasty emails. I've just thought now, but I've had nasty, tweets and stuff. But I haven't had any. I've had really nice emails from such a liberal Christian, and I certainly very much welcoming and open to that perspective. I suppose what I am taking seriously, what I am embracing, is something a little bit closer to orthodoxy, that no, there was something kind of cosmically special going on here, albeit a distinctive step in a broader project. But I would quickly follow that up with again emphasizing, because that's a bold claim, isn't it? That's a bold claim about reality. And I would quickly follow up by saying, I take this to be very uncertain.
Yeah.
And maybe I should just say a little bit, because I think this will connect to the second part of your question as well. I don't think of faith as a matter of certainty. In fact, maybe I wasn't quite explicit about this in the Capturing Christianity interview. I don't even think it's about belief. There's been interesting work in Karen Armstrong talks about it in her book, The Case for God, which is not a great title actually, because it's not what you'd imagine from that. It's a very interesting book. Not that it wouldn't be an interesting book with that title. I'll stop. About it's maybe a bit of a modern translation error that we equate faith with belief, or maybe we put that on one side for a moment. But actually, I think of faith really as about trust. It's about trusting a certain view of the meaning of existence, trusting it to guide you in terms of how you understand your deepest experiences and to shape your most fundamental life commitments. So it's about trust rather than belief. So just let me finish it. So what? Oh, go on, man.
No, I wasn't wanting to interrupt. I was sort of,
Sorry. Oh,
it
sorry.
was meant to be an appreciative kind of shrug.
Oh, right. Thank you. What's the difference between trust and belief? Well, I think both are connected to evidence, but I think there's a different threshold. I think basically a different level of confidence is involved. I
Hmm.
think of belief, I mean, different philosophers think about belief in different ways. I think of belief as quite strong confidence, not certainty, but maybe 70, 80% when you believe something. Whereas trust, I think you can be much less confident that it's true. I mean, I
Hmm.
suggest in the article in the interview, maybe 30%, is enough to try. I mean, certainty would be lovely, but on the other hand, I think we have a human need. Well, let's not go there yet. So I think trust basically involves um, much less. It involves evidence, right? I don't think
Hmm.
you should trust something that is ludicrously improbable. I don't think I should trust that I'm going to be, king soon, or aliens are going to come and rescue us from all our problems. It just requires, I think, that it's a credible possibility. So what I've
Hmm.
come to think is this theory of reality is a credible possibility. Now
Hmm.
that now that connects to how we're thinking. You said, "Oh, this is the only religion, and all the other ones get it wrong." Yes, I suppose I am trusting a religion. I'm choosing to trust a certain religion to guide my life and my spiritual practice that is inconsistent with others. But given that we're not demanding certainty, I'm open to the possibility that other faiths might turn out also to be credible possibilities.
Yeah.
So there
Yeah.
might be more than one faith that is rational to trust. And
Hmm.
even if, suppose even if I think some other religion, some other great religion, in my view, is not a credible possibility, nonetheless, I'm still that's still a judgment call, and I'm humble that a judgment call that I might have got wrong, people of this other religion might have got right. So I think this still holds open the possibility of a kind of pluralism
Right.
of allowing different faiths to flourish. One very, very, very quick last quick thing I just remembered I wanted to say. I don't really like talking about supernatural, right? I'm a panentheist, right? A panentheist is someone who thinks in some sense, the universe is inside God and maybe God inside the universe. These two things are intimately connected. And on this theory, I'm embracing getting more interconnected over time. So I don't like that. I know what you mean. It's going beyond the kind of ontology you would embrace, and it's more metaphysical commitments. But I don't like this idea because it's supernatural suggests, oh, there's the universe and there's God outside of it. That doesn't resonate with me. It doesn't. It seems inelegant. I don't like that. So I don't quite like the word supernatural, but I know what you mean.
Okay. No, 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 fair enough. Well, certainly extraordinary and anomalous, or something like that, we could say. I'm just wondering if two
Depends on your
follow-ups. That
worldview.
one is, well, I mean, that sort of thing doesn't happen all the time. People sort of, yeah. Um, I, I wonder if
I mean, there's
would
lots
it
of
be okay?
things in the universe that don't happen all the time. In evolutionary history, there are big jumps that don't happen all the time. Anyway, sorry, go on, ask your question.
Yeah. Okay. Let's talk about trust. I mean, I wrote my PhD, my first book, about the psychology of belief, and one of the things I wanted to do there was draw a distinction between credence, which is graded, and all-out belief, which I think should be modeled as a kind of active action and a commitment to standing by a certain proposition. And I think there are different kinds of epistemic commitment that one can make depending on the context. And some of them can be just for specific localized purposes and can be pragmatically driven. The commitment is to stand by the truth of something, but only for certain purposes, like as a lawyer might commit to taking it as a premise that their client is innocent for the purposes of their defense, whereas not in more other contexts, when, for instance, thinking about who to invite to look after her children. So there are different sorts of, I talked of policies of acceptance that could have wide or narrower scope. So I think what you said could fit in quite nicely to that, in that given your worldview, you it's to you it's helpful to make a certain sort perhaps circumscribed in certain ways commitment to a certain set of theological views, which you don't perhaps have 100% confidence in, maybe you don't even have 50% in, but which are going to help structure your life, structure activities, help you to flourish, I suppose you might say. And you can do that without denying that other options are available to others on the same sort of basis. So it's not an exclusionary thing. It's I'm going to accept this for certain purposes, but you may accept that for the similar purposes. And neither of us is, there's no question of one of us being right. It's what helps us flourish. There is a question of which has the higher credibility, but that's a separate issue which you could talk about in a more dispassionate sort of way. Does that kind of capture the way you see it then?
I think that gets it very nice. And there's a big literature on this if people are
Yeah,
interested in contemporary philosophy of religion, the nature of faith. I'm
yeah,
lecturing on it this week, my first lecture of the academic year. Um, on on I say the dominant view is non-doxasticism, which is doxastic means to do with belief, that faith isn't to be understood as belief. It's some other attitude, maybe hope, maybe trust, maybe acceptance, that you
yeah,
take it to be the case even though you're not confident that it is the case. And yeah, so I mean, I think so many people approach religion and they think, what you got to think is, is this definitely true? Is there
yeah.
any account? Is there any objection? And I think you should think the evidence is important. I think you
Mhm.
should think, is this a credible possibility? And but also, is this going to bring me? Is
Yeah,
this going to make me flourish? Is this going to bring me meaning and purpose? And I find, it's been a while. I'm just going public with this now, but it's been a while. I've been committed to this, and I think it has brought me a deeper sense of meaning and purpose. I talked on the Capturing Christianity interview about how I think it's sort of it's quieting my ego in just trying to aim at a greater purpose that is going on. That you know, well aware that you might
mhm,
be getting this wrong,
yeah,
but orientating myself in that way and seeing what I'm doing as for the sake of some greater project that's going on, I
mhm.
think has allowed me to be less bothered about my own personal success and failure and just enjoy the present moment. Actually,
Well,
people have this
I,
cliched idea, religion's about getting to heaven when you die, and that's no, definitely not. I think this has allowed me to be more in the present moment and more at peace. um
well, I
and
don't think
yeah, so
anyone,
I think it's the two things.
I don't think anyone could have a problem with that. But let me just push you a little bit, a little bit unsympathetically, maybe. But see, this
That's all right,
commitment, I
Pete.
can see that it could, that I mean, heaven knows we all need help to live by. We all, I guess, to some extent, um, we believe things on slender evidence because they just help us to get along. And we're frail, fragile, limited creatures, and we do our best. But you're also a philosopher. And so I'm wondering, how does this this acceptance, if you like, of certain theological claims, and particularly in a very liberal sense, how is that going to affect your philosophy? Is it now that there'll be some philosophical options that, because of this leap, this acceptance, this trust, you'll say, well, no, I'm not going to consider that now. I mean, it could be true, but I'm just going to keep it out of the, like what, atheism or whatever. You're just going to say, no, that's out of the picture for me now. I'm going to operate in this sphere here with these predefined boundaries, and maybe I've adjusted my priors, or I've just ruled out some options at the start. Not ruling them out in the sense I've conclusively proved that they're false, but just for me, they're no longer live options. I've defined it so that you're going to approach. I'm not saying there would be anything wrong with it. I guess we all do that, and maybe you're just doing it a bit more explicitly, and kudos to you for it. But is that the case? That you're going to be now more of a Christian philosopher uh, than than a completely open-minded one, if I'm putting it unsympathetically?
That is a great question. One thing actually that hasn't really come up in these discussions, that I have been open with, I talked about in my Why book, and I've done a couple of podcast discussions on, is that actually I have been a churchgoer for a long time, but as a religious fictionalist. That
Right.
is to say, someone who takes the religion of choice as as a profound and useful fiction. I've always, I mean, I do find great depth and meaning in the story of Christianity, independently of whether it's true. It's the sort of inversion of worldly values. This,
Yeah.
identifying God not with the king in the castle, but with the naked, executed peasant. The guy who hung out with outcasts. The first shall be last, and the last shall be first. That is political to me, and
Yeah.
the wonderful recent book by Tom Holland that's influenced a lot of people recently. Dominion talks about how this influenced, for example, the Roman Empire. This new idea that poor and weak people have some inherent dignity, and it was a bit of a shock for Roman aristocrats. And so 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 I embraced Christianity. I mean, I was always a spiritual person, I think,
Mhm,
but
mhm.
I took all the rest of it as a fiction. And my friend is a physics professor at my university who goes to my church, and it is basically that's his position. He's like saying to me, "Why do you believe all that mumbo jumbo?" After we've come out of communion. But so that used to be my position. It's only more recently I've gone from fictionalist to heretic. Um, but what's it? The, the fiction keeps life interesting, doesn't it? The fictionalism is there as a fallback, right? If I if I
That's
change
safe,
my mind,
as Jim Bowen would say.
and that gives me a wonderful kind of intellectual freedom that I mean, it wouldn't be costless because I feel I have found a deeper peace and a deeper happiness with where I am now. But it wouldn't be that radical a change. I think I'd still attend my church and so on. And I'd do it. I'd do it in a flash, actually, because I am quite, whether people believe me or not, I am quite obsessed with what's true. And I do want to know what's true ultimately and have my best guess. And every day there's an internal monologue question raising the biggest objections to my view. So I do carry on thinking of it. And I would say I'm very open
Right.
to changing my mind on all this plausibility of this form of Christianity, and then I'd go back to some kind of fictionalism.
So it's not, you don't see it as circumscribing the way you approach
I don't
philosophy
think
or
so. I mean,
yeah,
look, I'm sure we all have.
yeah,
We all have biases, don't we?
yeah,
And we all
yeah.
have. I do. Let me say, I do think there is something a bit unfair, asymmetric in that sort of religious people are accused of this and not secular people. Like my very close friend John, childhood friend. Whenever I talk about my philosophical views or religious views, oh, it's just your Catholic upbringing. But I think actually, I mean, I rejected Catholicism quite easily when I was 14. I attend an Anglican church now, actually. Little bit more liberal, maybe, a little bit more sort of
They
flexible in
don't take it as
theology.
seriously as the Catholics do.
It's mostly, as the comedian Dylan Moran said, the Anglican Church is mostly based around drinking tea. Sorry, I shouldn't. But what was that? Oh yeah, but I think what has been a much bigger force that has constrained me, rightly or wrongly, is the secular intellectual um, peer group I swim in. That, look, to be honest, I feel very silly talking about these things. I said that with the Why book, even more so now. This conversation right now, I find it difficult. I feel very silly talking about that Jesus stuff we were talking about, and so I find like that is to my mind something I need to be more a bias I need to be more careful of, because I find it hard to, as I've been persuaded of the arguments for these more religious views, I found it hard to embrace it because I feel stupid in front of my peers, and it's been hard to do that. So there's all these things we've got to constantly ask ourselves, and try and be as honest as we can. And I don't
Well,
think
no,
that's easy
I
to do.
think no, I really respect you for that, and some people say to me, oh, Philip Goff is, why do you take those sort of things seriously? I say, well, no, Philip's a sincere guy. Philip's a smart guy. He is an excellent philosopher, and he's honest. I mean, whatever he believes, he will defend carefully, cogently, and sincerely. And I'm always happy to talk to someone like that.
Oh, thank you, Keith.
I,
That's very
no,
kind of you
seriously.
to say so.
I think your the spirit. That's not the right word here, but the way in which you're approaching this, I think, is a model for both sides. Actually, it's a model of open-mindedness, and yes, you are coming out with some quite bold commitments. So, but you're approaching it with a spirit of intellectual humility, admitting that you could be wrong, admitting that that this is just that your credence in this may be fairly modest, and that there's an element of personal, there's a psychological element, I guess, to why this appeals to you, and I think that goes for all of us, as you said, on all sides. If anyone thinks that they're just operating on a purely intellectual level, assessing things purely according to the evidence and trains of rational argument, and that there are no hidden biases that are pushing them into one side or another, then they're deluding themselves. And if I would prefer people to be open and explicit about their bias. I think in some way that's because you know what your biases are and you're explicit about them, then perhaps they're less likely to constrain you. I don't know. Maybe, but so no. I think that's. This is one of the reasons that we've done this. That we've always done this mind chat, is that we want to show that there's a way of approaching issues which can be very divisive, very that can provoke all sorts of bitter feelings and aggression, indeed. But there's a way of approaching them that can maintain a certain strong position, but at the same time avoid that animosity and factionalism. And so I'm all for supporting you in that.
Thank you. And there's a nice quote here from David Simpson saying, "It is a little bit silly, but we still love you, Philip." Oh, that's nice, kind of. And do tell me if you think I am, believe it or not, I'm very open-minded on this. I am, and I want to know if I'm thinking about it in the wrong way. It's very uncertain. So it's like, you've got to be clear about what the intellectual error is. If I'm wrong about this, I'm not wrong in believing it because I don't believe it. I'm wrong in thinking it's a credible possibility. But anyway, if I'm wrong about that, I'd really like to know, and I'll keep on thinking about it.
Well, we'll keep on. Yeah, indeed. I will keep on. We'll all keep on thinking. I got a few more questions, but shall we look at some? There seem to be a lot of questions coming up from the.
Maybe we should.
So shall we?
If people wanna maybe put a Q, and then question, and then we can.
Quite a number of people listening in, and if you'd like to ask Philip and
Gnosis is being very charming as always. As I said on Twitter yesterday, I've got great affection for Nathan. I don't know why, because he's always very mean to me. I think it's like Stockholm syndrome or something. But anyway, go on. Sorry, I'm rambling. So shall I click on some questions and you'll read them out?
Yeah, if you like, and I can put them to you on behalf of the of whoever it is.
Go on. Who wants to ask our first question? So what do you think? Well, people, so if you want to ask
questions, let me ask you something. Let me ask you something else.
Well, I want to know what you think of all this, Keith. Oh no, go on. You.
No,
go on. Yeah, ask what you were going to say.
I was going. Well, it's kind of it's a similar point, really. The question is, why do you need a theological framework to underpin? I mean, it seems to me you have quite strong, ethical attitudes, instincts. I think you have a strong desire for the world to be a decent place, and to feel that the world is a decent place, and to feel that there is a force fighting against the apparent, not more than apparent, the obvious. I don't want to say evil, but the obvious cruel aspects of life, and I think that's, knowing you, I think that's a point to you that there should be some hope, really, of a better future. And it seems to me that is partly what's. I mean, I don't want to try psychoanalyzing you or anything, but that seems to be what drives your attraction to this idea of the universe as something that's evolving in a positive direction. I guess that's a sort of spirit of some of the early pragmatists like Peirce, isn't it? Anyway, rambling. Now, I too feel that, but I don't feel that I want. First, I don't feel it's legitimate to move from "I would like it to be that way" to "oh, it probably is that way," and I don't find any of the arguments really plausible. I mean, there are lots of other ways of responding to for instance, the fine-tuning thing. And in a way, I don't want to make my hope hostage to that kind of theological claim or metaphysical claim. I want to say, okay, there are all sorts of cruelties and in the world, meaningless cruelties, and we've just got to try and create the hope ourselves. We've got to find it in ourselves. We've got to supply it. It's no good saying, oh, there's some wonderful, there's some force at work without. No, it's down to us. The world is the universe wasn't designed for us. I have no idea why it's here, but it's here, and it doesn't show any signs of being designed for us. We seem to show every sign of being designed for it by evolutionary processes. And those evolutionary processes have brought us to a point where we are self-aware and we can comprehend our situation in the way that no other animals are, and we can start to realize, it brings us to this existentialist sort of crisis of being aware of ourselves in a meaningless universe. And the only real response to that is to find meaning ourselves, to create that meaning, to us, be ourselves the source of meaning. Now, so getting down to a question, why won't that do? Why does it need to be embedded in the nature of the universe?
I'm working on a book on this, on reimagining religion, by the way. And, I definitely wouldn't want to say, oh, you have to be religious to live a happy life. Like someone like William Lane Craig seems to say, this Christian philosopher seems to say, life is just totally meaningless if there's no God. And I would encourage lots of different experiments in living and trying to find meaning in different ways. I definitely think you can have a
million phrase life. There.
Sorry?
Experiments in living. That's a phrase from Mill, isn't it?
Oh, is it? Is it really?
Isn't it? Well, maybe I meant.
It could well be.
Carry on, sorry.
It probably is. I definitely think you can have a meaningful life in the way you just described. I suppose what I say in the Why book is I think potentially there is the potential for more meaning and significance if there is a greater purpose going on and what you're doing is contributing to this greater purpose. We want to make a difference, and if you can contribute to some cosmic project, then that's about as big a difference, as big a meaning as you could possibly imagine. But there's high, it's kind of risk reward, and this is what I would talk about William James's great paper, the will to believe, in the article. And he said, look, there's this, it's kind of, you're taking a risk. Someone like me, and you said that yourself, Keith, just in what you just said. I think you're taking a risk believing in a bold theory of reality that might not be true. You're hostage to that. But there's high risk, high rewards. I think there is the potential for more kind of meaning. Perhaps you disagree, but maybe even if it's relevant to a particular individual will find more meaning and flourishing in this way.
To me that
you just got to balance out those two things.
But it still seems to me that in the end it has to come from us. I mean, even if there is this cosmic purpose, I've still got to choose to identify with it and embrace it. So why don't I just what does it matter if it's actually there? It's still got to be mine. If I say, to hell with the cosmic principle, I don't care. Yeah, it's down to me in the end. I mean, anyway, let's. By the way, I've written a paper arguing for. Sorry,
these things matters, doesn't it? If
I just don't. I think I'm too small and insignificant to really relate to a great cosmic. Anyway, I was just going to say that I've written a paper
out for a minute there.
I've written a paper defending doxastic voluntarism. It's way back. It was in Mind many years ago. So you could use me. Anyway, let's have some questions now. So we've got one here from Digital Gnosis. This is Nathan, I think, right? And he asks, what is your credence in theism and atheism, respectively? So we want numbers here, Philip, that add up to 100.
So, for people who don't know, credence is technical term for degree of belief. Well, if we're talking about theism as the omnigod, all knowing, all powerful, perfectly good, I would say very, very low. Maybe, maybe a couple of percent, maybe even lower. I haven't thought about that, but because of the problem of suffering. But if we're talking about a god of limited power or something in that ballpark, I'd say pretty high actually. So I would say I believe that because I think maybe yeah, maybe 70-80% even, because I think the fine tuning is very strong. The fine tuning, you're hostage to the science changing. That's the biggest uncertainty to my mind about fine tuning is that the scientific evidence might change. We've got to be open to that, but also that the psychophysical harmony stuff. I do feel very confident about, I suppose. So yes, so I would give a very high credence, and then if by atheism we're meaning the negation of that, then it's whatever the rest, 25%
Okay.
or whatever. Yeah, but I hasten to add my credence in Christianity in particular much
Yeah.
much much lower. Max maybe around the 50% mark. That's quite high, isn't it? 40-50%. I don't know, something like that.
Hmm. Okay. Okay.
Should we
Another question?
sorry, I should have been. So the next cue is from Nathan again.
Okay.
But
Okay.
put your cues up, people, if you want to ask a question.
Yes. So let me ask you it then on Nathan's behalf. Given you have experienced lots of physical bodies and not spiritual ones, why does a spiritual resurrection have a higher prior for you?
Well,
Um,
I think Nathan's slightly misunderstanding the view on the resurrection I go for
mhm.
here, which is this was the final piece in the jigsaw. Reading Dale Allison's book on the resurrection, who's a biblical scholar, which is this view that's sort of a middle way, I think of it, between the liberal view and the traditional view. So it's not a purely spiritual idea. I mean, partly because I'm a panentheist. I don't think God is outside of the universe, so I don't believe in this sort of spiritual realm that's totally separate from the physical realm. Um, the idea is that um, the the bit that's more on the liberal side of things is that the experiences of the resurrection experiences of the first Christians were visionary rather than seeing and touching a body, right? There was some kind of, imagine what we think of Paul on the road to Damascus, thrown off his horse onto the ground and is having this intense, powerful vision. So in the conception of Christianity I take seriously, that was what was going on with lots of people shortly after Jesus died, right? People getting thrown to the ground and having these wild visions. But what was it of? I think it was of a change in physical reality, of, in some radical sense, God and the universe becoming more intertwined. So it wasn't something pure in some platonic, purely spiritual realm. This was a change in physical reality. So I suppose that would be.
You do think that something extraordinary happened in the tomb. You think that Jesus' body didn't just decompose; that it was actually transformed into some other kind of. I think I'm not sure what you think, but you thought it was transformed in some utterly extraordinary way.
So when you say I think, again, just to emphasize, like, that sounds like I believe this, whereas I wouldn't say I
Mhm.
believe it, but in the kind of conception of Christianity I trust, yes, there was some transformation to the body. So Allison argues that the first Christians identified the resurrection and the ascension. So and what we find in the Gospel of Luke, where these are two events, right? Jesus rises from the dead, hangs around for a bit, chatting to people. Sorry, I'm being slightly farcical, and then floats up to heaven. Um, Obviously, a bit of a problem there. Now we know heaven isn't up there, but he thinks that was a later development. Not that Luke was lying. Maybe he was just filling in details he didn't know about. But he thinks the early Christians thought that, yes, the the body was sort of or absorbed into the divine or something. And if you're a panentheist like me, that involves the body being sort of absorbed into the universe. So there is a bold metaphysical hypothesis here that I feel a bit silly describing to you. It's a bold metaphysical hypothesis,
You think that has
but
happened?
it's
Do you think that
I'm
has
not
happened?
sure.
Sorry, I was
I'm
just
not
going to
just
ask.
just to say I'm not confident that it's true, but I think it's part of this possibility. I think is a credible possibility. Sorry, go on, Keith.
I was just going to ask if you think that's something that just happened once, or whether
I
it's
guess I think it happened once. Yeah.
just once.
So there was something special going on here.
You're right.
As
That's
but look, I mean,
probably your most traditional
yeah,
spectrum of
yeah.
Christianity.
I mean,
Then
I think of the view I'm describing as a middle way between the very liberal view and the very traditional view. Um, but yeah, I mean, there are big leaps in evolutionary history, right?
don't think that's your
Big
strongest
one-off
position.
moments. No,
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 I don't
I'm
think
not
that.
saying no. Let me be clear on the analogy. I heard how that comes across as I said it. Now, from my perspective, there is it's not just natural evolution. There is cosmic evolution. There is a bigger ongoing cosmic evolution going on. So if it has particular moments that are radical jumps, that doesn't seem to me too parochial or inelegant. So that was
Okay,
by analogy, only analogy in natural evolution. There are big leaps, right? So just
okay.
because
Well,
all I'm saying is just because there is a big leap, obviously this is a very different, much bolder proposal, but just because there are big leaps in a process doesn't mean, you know, that that this is a sort of
I won't push you on too
totally
much. And
discontinuity is a radical sort of discontinuity.
if
Go.
if it only happened once in one spatio-temporal location in the entire history, in the entire space, I mean, that's something that you see. My big problem with religion. I mean, we need to get into one question, but I'll just say this because my big problem with all religious traditions is that they were formed, they were created, and the doctrines were created at a time when we had absolutely no comprehension of the true scale of the universe, both temporal and spatial. We thought that basically the Earth was the center of it all, that there was stuff going around the Earth, but not too far away, probably. And moreover, we thought that we on Earth were particularly special, that there was a hierarchy of creation and we were kind of at the top, and indeed that some humans were maybe higher than others. We had this very anthropocentric view of the universe. And from the 17th century onwards, that view has been utterly transformed. The universe is vastly bigger than we could possibly have imagined it to be, and vastly older. And so once any idea that something of cosmic significance happened uniquely here on this little planet is just utterly incredible to me. So I don't know if you actually mean to say that maybe you meant that it just happened once in the course of Earth history, which would be, more feasible. But I just find the idea that we can take anything of that literally, that was views that were formed at that time about the nature of the cosmos,
I
and hold
suppose,
on to
yeah.
it in the face of what we now know. I find it very, very hard.
I mean, take the participatory view. It's very interesting what you're pushing, what you're pressing, Keith. Take the participatory view. You could have a non-Christian version of that, which takes out all those elements you're worrying about, right? Where it's just, look, there's this ongoing
Yeah.
process of God and the universe becoming more intertwined. There's no big moment on any planet, and it's an ongoing process. And and that would in a sense be simpler. So
Hmm.
I suppose my starting point is okay, that makes sense. But then I find the biggest religion in the world with this quite extraordinary character as its founder, and I I I I would push that there is something slightly hard to explain about the origins of Christianity. I wouldn't want to push that too far, but there's something. So okay, and then it adds these extra elements that maybe detracts from the simplicity, but the fact that it's still fits with this more general view that, to my mind, is a relatively simple, credible option relative to the cosmic purpose story, which is obviously in the background. Makes me take that seriously. And look, I buy all that you're saying in a sense, and it lowers my credence, right? This is why I'm sort of somewhere between 30 and 50%, right? Because I take all this seriously. But still, the fact that, yeah, I mean, we did have a very much uh inferior understanding of the universe at this time. And so
I'll
it's
say.
not to be it's not to be expected really that this religion that was developed then fits with a hypothesis that currently has strong evidential support. I know you disagree with that, but from my perspective, I think current evidence does strongly support a God of limited powers. And this version of Christianity, maybe quite surprisingly, fits with that. So then that gives me kind of pause for thought and is enough for me to take this seriously, which is all I can say about it, really.
I think one thing I really hope people take away from this is the way that you keep referring back to credences, to degrees of probability, and to the willingness to change your mind. I wish everyone on all sides would be more open to that sort of that perspective, because too many people they make these kind of commitments, and we do need to make flat out. Sometimes you have to you have to decide which side you're on. Okay, it's all right to have these vague opinions, but sometimes you have to act. You have to make up your mind. As I wrote a lot about this. You have to make up your mind what you want. Switch from fluctuating desirabilities to a categorical choice, and you have to sometimes make up your mind what you think. And the trouble is, once people have done that, they tend to then dig in their heels and say, that's where I planted my flag, and that's where I will stand, and nothing will move me. And of course, then they only seek out evidence that confirms the commitment they've made. They ignore evidence against it, and they become more, and indeed their credence rises because they're very selective with the evidence now, and they dig themselves deeper and deeper into this trench. And the other side do the same, and then you have intractable conflict. So I've no objection to people making these kind of commitments, but keep them light, be flexible with them, be more mobile, be ready to change, and
I mean,
don't make them prematurely.
it might sound like I'm not confident in my view. I'm not certain of my view, but actually, in a way, I am confident in my view, because my view is that it's not that certain. that is my view. We need to talk about meta credences, right? So
Yeah,
there's your
yeah,
credence, how likely you think it is, but then how likely are you wrong about your view about how likely it is? So my view of Christianity is that it's a credible possibility that has some non-negligible chance of being true, and I'm
yeah.
confident about
That's
that.
not going to go down in the deep
Uh,
south, at the revival meetings.
yeah. Well, that's the best we got, I think.
Let's have some
Anyway,
more
should we go for
questions.
this next question?
The question here from Dinesh, is it Etla? What does your practice consist in? Religion has never been solely about intellectual efforts of thinking up a plausible worldview, but living it. What spirituality? What is spirituality for you? That's a good question. I think. How is this? How are you living
Absolutely.
this?
Very true. These aren't abstract intellectual puzzles. They are life commitments about how we structure our fundamental life goals, our spiritual practices. Um, so I'm an Anglican. Don't go to church absolutely every week, but maybe every other week in a very vibrant, uh, healthy community that does a lot of stuff in the community. We have an annual Eco Fest that has brought together for the first time many environmental groups in the area. Um, and I suppose practice me, I meditate every morning, pray every night. So I think it's sort of listening to God in the morning, talking to God in the evening. And I suppose, I mean, one thing about prayer is and this is consistent with the fictionalism now. It's a time to bring to mind those you're concerned about, those who are suffering, about, or maybe in your personal life or in the world more generally. Um, Lighting a candle is a moment to do that. So there is this real value in religion, I think, in the way of bringing the community together to reflect on ethical issues, to mark the seasons and the big moments of life, birth, marriage,
Mhm, mhm,
coming of age, death, that I think, the secular world has never quite managed to replicate. Not to say it
mhm,
couldn't. Philip Kitcher has a very interesting book, the humanist Philip Kitcher, Life After Faith, where he talks about, he encourages the secular humanist world to set up comparable institutions, and I would very much welcome that. And
mhm, mhm.
as I say, encourage different experiments in living. So I think, but I think my prayer is, thinking about the day to come, thinking about people I know who are suffering, and that's good for me just practically, because I am a bit thoughtless in where, I just get involved, I forget about I care, but then I just forget, and so it's good to remind myself and think, oh, I might message them tomorrow.
I think
But
it would be
also
good
I
if we
think,
all did that. I absolutely. I think we should all set aside some time to do that, whether within a religious framework or not. I
yes,
mean, these are
yes,
actually very human things to do, and I think the best. In many ways, religion also brings out the worst in people, but it does bring out some very human and very precious things. And I remember Dan Dennett said, obviously notorious atheist, but he said this wonderful thing. He said that we must be careful in attacking formal religion, traditional religion, not to lose some of the precious things that religion fostered. And he said, I love this quote. He said, religion is the religious community is a place which, like home, where when you go, they have to take you in, no matter what you've done. I think that's a very precious sentiment, and so we must be careful that we. And I suppose this is one reason why I'm a little worried about the supernaturalist elements, because I feel they might sort of take the ship down with it, and um, there's a danger that we will disregard the precious aspects of religion. Um, anyway, so let's.
yeah. I remember on the boat we were both on 10 years ago, I had a chat with Dennett about, I told him I was a religious fictionist. I was a bit scared to do that, actually, never mind what I am now, but I was a bit scared to say that. But he was quite warm and welcoming, actually, saying there were aspects of um,
Hmm,
religious rituals that he likes himself. And but yeah, I mean, I think, but coming to the more, I don't want to make it sound like it's just the elements that are compatible with fictionalism. I suppose
yeah,
I,
yeah, yeah,
I what I
yeah,
found flourishing in is trying to balance, like I'm talking about meditating in the morning, praying at night, try and balance these elements of being very much in the present moment, and but also trying to fundamentally orientate myself to this bigger purpose that I am trusting is I'm living in hope is going on, and seeing what I'm doing as part of that. And so it's sort of the orientating yourself to these two extremes, like right now and the purposes of the universe. And sort of it's nice because it kind of cuts out all the crap in between, like, when am I gonna when am I going to get this book deal? When am I going to get more viewers? When am I going to, when's this person going to like me? But if you just, you've obviously got to engage with these things, but just trying to, as much as possible, bring yourself back to, no, right now and the purposes of the universe. I found that has made me happier on a daily basis, trying to just orientate myself in that way. So even if it's all bollocks, it's made me a bit happier. Okay.
I think no one could object to that. Um, Ross B, why Christianity rather than Buddhism, Islam, etc.? You've sort of addressed that, I think, but yes, maybe you can say a bit more.
So
You should,
definitely the fact that I'm only required. I think all that's required for faith is a credible possibility. That opens up the possibility that there might be more than one credible possibility. And if one gets to that point, I think it would be a rational option to decide on pragmatic considerations like your cultural identity. So if I was raised Muslim and I did some philosophy and decided what does 30% chance Islam is correct, 30% chance Christianity is correct, but it would be such a wrench for me to become Christian because I'm so, my cultural identity is so much wrapped up, and I feel comfortable in the Islamic way of worshiping and so on, then I think it would be rational to to continue as a Muslim or to be a Muslim. Um,
Mhm.
Now, because it gets tricky if we got to the point where we thought, one religion was overwhelmingly more probable, but I, I I don't think I'm at the stage of thinking that. But seeing as you're asking about turning to the more theoretical philosophical questions, I mean, I've got a hell of a lot of time for Buddhism, but I do think there's strong evidence for a God of limited powers, and Buddhism is kind of atheistic, right? There is no purpose or directionality to the universe. We're sort of trying to, as I understand Buddhism, happy to be corrected, we're trying to escape from the negative karma to return ourselves to nirvana, something which is hard to describe, which is not something new that's created. So I suppose there is that clash with where I happen to believe the evidence is pointing. With Islam, I've never heard an Islamic scholar defend a God of limited powers, so I don't know. I'd just be
Mm.
interested in hearing what Islamic. I mean, could you marry that with God revealing the Quran to Muhammad? I don't know. There are similar difficulties, which is this paper I've got under review about, marrying the resurrection and the incarnation and so on with a God of limited power. So there's a challenge there too. But I'd want to
Mm.
hear if I was gonna hold Islam to be a credible possibility, I'd want to know that it's compatible with a God of limited powers. Judaism, I would imagine, is compatible with it. Well, there is a Rabbi Harold Kushner, who in the 80s had this best-selling book defending a God of limited power. So I guess I would say a very liberal form of Judaism would be a credible possibility. Um, so yeah, this is something I want to think more about. But let me just add, because I do want to add this. Even if, say, I think a certain religion isn't a credible possibility, I'm humble enough to think I might have got that judgment call wrong, and I
Mhm.
still, just as I
Mhm.
respect your terrible views, Keith, I don't accept them. I think they've got a low probability, and likewise, but I respect that I might have got it wrong. You might have got it right.
Mhm.
So just
Mhm.
because
Mhm.
just because I say no, I don't think that religion is a rational option. I'm not saying, get rid of them, make it illegal. I'm saying, look, I might have got it wrong. We live in a pluralistic society where we embrace different beliefs, different judgment calls, and that's wonderful.
Okay, shall we try to get a few more
Oh yeah,
questions? There are a lot
sorry, I'm
backing up
forgetting my
there. So,
job.
why is Jesus uniquely divine? Can't someone be as venerable as Jesus, especially in the future? Yeah, interesting. Yes, because you said this was the second stage, as it were. This was a crucial moment, and in many religions, the main venerable title is theoretically achievable by all prophet, avatar, sage. That's an interesting point. This is from Game Gyro
Yeah,
56. Why did it have to be just this
yeah. Look,
particular individual?
I mean, one way of answering this is just although although I don't take the New Testament to be the revealed word of God, I do think it is a pretty good guide to what the early Christians thought, and I suppose I'm persuaded to some extent by less liberal scholars that, I mean, even a lot of liberal scholars would say this, that this is what the early Christians thought, that this is, that Jesus had this special cosmic role. So then if we're rejecting that, we are essentially rejecting Christianity, or being fictionalists about it. And I take that option very seriously. Maybe one day I'll return to the fictionalist option. But insofar as we are taking Christianity seriously, that is sort of part of the package, I think. I mean, I like Dale Allison, who I talk about, who's very much influenced me on this. What I like is he's sort of got a liberal disposition like me, but he's ended up having a somewhat more conservative biblical scholarship. And I've kind of ended up in that direction as well. That it's nice when where you end up is against. I mean, not ludicrously conservative, but I think, for example, that I think the early Christians thought Jesus had this. I don't agree with Bart Ehrman, for example, that Jesus being uniquely divine was a later construction, although who knows. So that's kind of part of the package. And look, to repeat, I do agree that lowers the probability of it, because it's a big addition
Yeah.
to the story, and that, Occam's razor, it lowers the probability. But I guess for me, it doesn't lower it enough to. It's still a non-negligible possibility.
Okay. Can we get a couple more in?
Sorry,
There
I
are lots
keep
of
forgetting.
questions here.
Yeah, maybe better just maybe a couple more. I suppose I'm still not fully
Yeah.
recovered from my brain bleeds, and so I am starting to
Sure.
feel
We will.
the energy
If
flowing out of me a little bit. So
absolutely.
maybe
Just
should we
as
do
soon as
should
you're
we do
ready.
a
As,
couple more, and then
as soon as you're ready to go, just say I don't want to
I
do
am
over.
really enjoying this, but I am
How do you explain
flagging a little.
resurrection claims such as that of Menachem Mendel Schneerson by his followers in the 20th century? I don't know what that's referring to, but I hope you do.
Thanks, Nathan, again. Hi, Nathan. Yeah, this I like this question. So you have this debate, I suppose. Okay, very traditional Christian apologists like William Lane Craig might say, there's something uniquely mysterious and difficult to explain about the origins of Christianity, and we have to believe in a resurrection. That's the only option. Whereas someone like Bart Ehrman, sort of agnostic biblical scholar, will say, "Now look, there's all these similar miracle stories, blah 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 blah." And sorry, I didn't mean to mock him. And they're on a par. I suppose I'm always the middle way person, and I I think yeah, I think I'm saying there is something a bit hard to explain about the origins of Christianity. Um, Lots of people having these experiences, um, including someone who was a violent opponent of the movement. So there's something a bit weird, but there are other things. But I agree with what Nathan seems to be hitting at there, and what Bart Ehrman says. There are other weird things in history, right? If you hear the Mary Celeste, where this ship that was found, was it the 19th century? We've sort of no one on it, but nothing had been damaged, or there was no signs of violence, just the crew had gone. Is it alien abduction? Is it what's going on? There are things that are very hard to explain. And look, extraordinary events require extraordinary evidence. So I think if you're starting from an atheistic worldview, then you should just say, okay, it was a bit weird, but weird things happen. But if like me, you've got to a point where you know, because it fits with your worldview, a certain interpretation of Christianity you think is a credible possibility, and if it can provide a more satisfying explanation of the origins of Christianity, then I think, well, then we start to get some reason to take it seriously. But just to add again, I have a very different view of the origins of Christianity to many traditional Christians like William Lane Craig. I don't think the early Christians were seeing and touching a body. I think they were having wild visions. Nonetheless, I think that can provide a more satisfying explanation of this slightly unusual worldview. So to put, extraordinary events require extraordinary evidence, but what is extraordinary depends on your worldview. To put it in Bayesian terms, we have to think about the prior probability as well as the evidence.
Yeah, but I guess Nathan's point here is that the many traditions in which report things every bit as extraordinary. I mean, the golden tablets being discovered in the American West and translated by an angel. For instance, a lot of people find
so
that.
Let's suppose the evidence for Mormonism and the evidence for Christianity were equal. Okay, we've got another important question. The prior probability, like how probable, if people don't know what prior probability means, how probable is this before you look at the evidence? How much of a credible option is this before we come to the evidence? And I guess I now think that this version of Christianity, not not a more traditional version, but this version of Christianity is a credible possibility. So I come to looking at the historical events with that backdrop. I don't I haven't looked into Mormonism too much, but from what I know about it, I don't think I would think it was a credible option any before looking at the evidence. So we've got to balance those two things. We can't just look at the evidence. We need to look at the intrinsic probability,
Okay.
if you like, or the probability, how probable it is relative to our more general worldview. And my more general worldview is a God of limited powers. I think there's very good evidence for that. And I think
Mhm.
this version of Christianity fits with that. So it's, in a sense, it's not an extraordinary worldview, right? Yes, extraordinary worldviews require extraordinary evidence, but it's not an extraordinary worldview. It's not an
It's
extraordinary hypothesis relative to my worldview. Mormonism, I think I probably would think is more extraordinary and requiring
it's
more evidence.
it's all about your priors, isn't it?
It
Well,
is.
the
It is.
question, can I just pick up a question here that I think we've missed from Will Bry? Question for Philip. One I wanted to ask, does the strength of the psychic harmony argument rely on whether you're a direct or indirect realist about perception? I
That's a good question,
I
isn't
don't
it?
know the answer to that myself. It's an interesting one, but
I mean, I suppose
I suppose
I am flagging a bit. I think if I wasn't
I
flagging, I
yeah, I
could.
guess I guess the point is that if you're an indirect realist, then you might one way to solve the problem would just be an idealist, I suppose, wouldn't it?
I mean,
I guess.
I don't think the knowledge argument is dependent on direct or indirect realism, because you could
No.
just think what Mary learns about is something about redness out there. It's qualitative character, but I mean, is pain? So, what do direct realists think about pain? Is it? I suppose if you're the kind of direct realist, think it's experience of bodily damage.
Mm, yeah.
S- I'll have to think about. Let me think about
Let's
that.
leave. Look,
Yeah,
I'm
it's an
concerned
interesting
now
question.
that
Thank you.
you've we've had you on the rack, figuratively speaking, for an hour and a half, and I think it's time to let you go. With a conditional pass, I think we will say that we will tolerate your heresy for the time being, and we will monitor your progress. We will keep an eye on you, but you never know when we might turn up again to interrogate you. So you know, don't be complacent. As after all, you know that no one expects the Frankish Inquisition.
That's taken, and that's taken very seriously, and I will
So
repent my ways
go
and contemplate and think harder and be prepared to recant should it be
I've enjoyed talking to you,
demanded.
and it's always a
No,
pleasure to
this is
listen to someone who can discuss matters such as these in a calm, respectful, thoughtful, humble way.
no, this has been thanks, Keith. This has been very useful actually to spell out some more of these details, and I've very much enjoyed the questions people have asked, including yourself, Keith, and that's helping
And
me. I'm still thinking about this. I'm still working on it. I've still got the fictionalist option in reserve. So this is all really, really, really helpful.
excellent, Philip. Well, you go and rest up because we've got another man
Oh,
chat later in the week on Friday.
yes, tune in for Andy Clark. How do we end this show when we're
Well, you
talking
see,
about Christianity
we
rather
should say
than
something like we can both agree that
that the logos
God,
is
say that God is whether he's inside the unit, whether she is inside the universe, outside the universe, or simply a fiction of our own minds. He, she, it, they is wherever it is, and
and everywhere else and nowhere else.